Hi everybody, my name is Jens Larsen. In this video I want to give you some guidelines and some tips on how you can spend your practice time more efficiently. It's very easy to get lost in all the different scales that are available and that you'll see mentioned for different options over the chord progressions that you want to play over. But really when you're practicing, you want to spend your time working mostly on the scales that you really need. Now I play guitar for a living and I teach and I play over a lot of different chord progressions. And there are actually only 3 scales that you really need and that will cover most of the songs that you're going to play, and you want to spend most of your time practicing on those, and that's what I want to talk about in this video. If you want to learn more about jazz guitar, about improvising over chord changes and improving the lines that you play, then subscribe to my channel. If you want to make sure not to miss anything, then click the little bell notification icon next to the subscribe button. Let's first figure out which scales do we need and where do we need them, and then later in the video I'll talk a little bit about how you can practice so that's actually helping you when you want to improvise. This is the basic cadence in C major, and of course it can come as no surprise that the scale you need for this is a C major scale. And really what you want to do, of course you want to play the C major scale, but you also want to emphasize the chord tones of the chord that you're playing over. So when you're improvising over the D minor 7, you need to emphasize the chord tones of that D minor 7, and that goes for all the other chords in the cadence. And in fact with a major scale you probably want to be able to do this with all the chords that you have in the scale. So that goes for the F major 7, E minor 7, A minor 7, and B half diminished. And they're so common that you need all of them, you're going to come across all of them if you start playing jazz. You might want to realize that if you only knew the major scale, then you already have enough material to play a song that has as few sounds as So What or Impressions, but it's also enough to just play over a song like Giant Steps. The basic minor cadence is a little bit more complicated than the major version because we already have 3 different scales happening just within these 3 chords. So for the B half diminished, well, as I just mentioned, this is found in C major, so that's probably coming out of a C major scale. For the E7 flat 9, here played also with a flat 13, this is actually coming out of an A harmonic minor. And then for the A minor 6, you would use A melodic minor. Now we've covered a cadence to a major chord and also a cadence to a minor chord. So we actually have the basic cadences in the key, but we also already covered all the secondary cadences and secondary dominants that you'll come across because they follow the exact same pattern. So if we look at going to the 4th degree in C major, so we have C and we want to have a cadence to F major, and it's going to be a major cadence because F is a major chord. So we're going to treat it as a 2-5-1 in F and play F major scale over the G minor and the C7, resolving it to F. In the same way, if I want to go to E minor, so I'm in C and I want to go to E minor, I'll use a 2-5-1 in E minor, and that's going to be F sharp half diminished. I'm going to be using a G major scale for that, and then B7 flat 9, I'm going to be using E harmonic minor for that, and then resolve that to my E minor 7 here. Another thing you're going to come across quite often is going to be a 4 minor chord. So in the key of C major, 4 minor is some sort of F minor. And there are going to be, roughly speaking, 3 ways you're going to come across this chord. The first one will be F minor 6, which is probably the most common one. And the other one will be F minor major. Both of these, so F minor 6, this actually follows the tonic minor cadence. So the tonic chord here is also a 6 chord, so we'll be using melodic minor, and the same goes for the F minor major. There's also going to be the case where it's turned into a 2-5. That's really sort of a reharmonization, because in jazz we turn pretty much anything into a 2-5. And in this case that would be F minor 7 to B flat 7. But that is a 2-5 and it's just a major cadence, so you would be using the major scale over it. In this case that would be an E flat major scale that you then need to resolve to C major. Diminished chords are a type of chords that are causing a lot of people a lot of trouble when they're improvising. Really there are 2 different types of diminished chords that you're going to come across. One that's dominant and one that's subdominant. So if we just first take the dominant version, so that would be C major 7 to C sharp diminished to D minor 7. So here the C sharp diminished is just there to take us to the D minor 7, and it's kind of working as an A7. And the scale you would use on it would be D harmonic minor. So you're taking the harmonic minor scale of the chord that it's resolving to. And of course, D harmonic minor has a C sharp diminished on the 7th degree in the scale. The diminished as a subdominant chord could be something like this: C major 7, E flat diminished, D minor 7 to G7. So here the E flat diminished is not resolving like a dominant, so it's not really acting like a B7, and it's resolving down to another subdominant chord, so that would be this D minor 7. The scale you'd use for it would be E harmonic minor, so the harmonic minor scale from the 3rd of the major key. If you want to check out some more on these diminished chords, then I have a video that's really dedicated to that, and I'll link to that in the description of this video, where you can find some examples of voice leading and also some lines over these different types of diminished chords. Now we have the diatonic chords covered in major. We have cadences for a major and a minor key. We also have the auxiliary or secondary dominants and cadences covered, and the 4 minor and the diminished chords. There are a few dominants and also some special cases with dominants that are also fairly common, and that will be the next thing to cover. So the first one will probably be the tritone substitute. So if we take a tritone substitute in the key of C, could be something like D minor, D flat 7 to C major. And in this case, the D flat 7 is a Lydian dominant, and the scale you'd use over it would be a melodic minor scale, and that would be the A flat melodic minor scale. Another one would be the backdoor dominant. So that could be something like F major, B flat 7 to C major. And in this case, the backdoor dominant is again also a Lydian dominant, and the scale you would use over it would be F melodic minor. And that actually also fits with the fact that here you can see that the backdoor dominant is working as a 4 minor chord, and we're using the same scale as we would if it was an F minor 6 chord. The last type of dominant that I want to talk about is the German augmented 6th, or double diminished sharp 4, a little bit depending on what kind of angle you're coming from when you look at that chord. In the key of C, that could be something like this: F major 7 and then A flat 7 back to C major. So in this case, again, it's just a Lydian dominant, so you're going to treat it as an A flat 7 with a sharp 11, and you're going to be using the melodic minor scale that's from the 5th of the chord, so that would be E flat melodic minor. Then we have two different cases where we get a different dominant than what we expect. The first one would be D minor 7, G7 flat 9 to C major 7. Now this is obviously a cadence to C major, but in C major we don't have a G7 flat 9, but we do have one in C harmonic minor, so that's the scale you would be using for this. The other version of this would be having a D minor 7 and then having really like a G7 altered, and then resolving that to C major 7. And here you would use the G7 alter scale, which is A flat melodic minor. Using the alter scale and improvising over altered dominants is something that can be a little bit difficult if you're not used to it. I'm not going to cover how to do that here, but if you want to check it out, I'll link to a video where I talk about it in the description of this video. If we sum this up, then we only need 3 scales. We need the major scale, the harmonic minor scale, and the melodic minor scale. And we can actually refine it a little bit more, because if we look at the major scale, then we pretty much need all of the diatonic chords in there. For the harmonic minor scale, I'm actually only using that on the dominants and on the diminished chords, and for the melodic minor scale, I'm using that on the tonic minor chords, and I'm using that for Lydian dominants and for altered dominants, and that's about it. So we refined it, and there are actually only a few things that we need to work on, and we've cut away a lot of stuff that we're not going to use that much, and that's going to make it a lot more efficient, and that you're going to be working on practicing towards the stuff that you really need when you're playing, rather than having to spend time on working on specific chords and scales that are not that common. So how do you use this information and incorporate it into your practice routine? The thing you need to realize here is that when you're only using 3 scales, you need to know them extremely well. So that means that, of course, you need to know how to play them. So with our C major scale here, you of course want to be able to play it, but you also need to know the diatonic harmony that's found in there. So you want to know what the notes are, what the diatonic chords are, and you also want to be able to play the different diatonic arpeggios. So probably that means maybe checking out the scale in diatonic arpeggios like this, and being aware of what arpeggios you're playing, so that you can easily find those arpeggios and use them, because that's kind of how you're using this scale. So if you're improvising with a C major scale over an F major chord, F major 7 chord, like this, then you're using this scale, but you want to emphasize the notes of the chord, because if you're playing over a jazz tune, then that's part of the language, that's a skill that you want to have. You want to bring out the harmony in your improvised line, and that means that you kind of need to emphasize these notes, which is just the F major 7 arpeggio found in this scale position. That means just practicing sort of having the sound of this and then trying to come up with melodies that work like that. So I think if you hear that melody, you can hear that I'm really emphasizing the F major 7. If I play, you can also hear that that's not really that sound. Maybe another example would be, doesn't sound like this chord. So in that way, you want to emphasize those sounds, and that's sort of the connection you want to work with and you want to get better at while you're practicing and while you're working on it. And really you want to be able to do that with any kind of subset of notes that you can find. That's what you're aiming for, because if you can generalize this, then that means that whatever you want to play, whatever set of notes you want to play, whatever diatonic chord in any of the other scales that you want to work also as a special effect, you can kind of easily do it because you're worked on it like this when you're practicing your major scales. If you work on your scales in this way, then you are covering most of the harmony that you're going to come across if you play in a jazz setting, and you're also kind of setting yourself up to getting better at checking out some of the other scales, because of course you want to focus on these 3 scales because that's what you need most of the time. But it is also nice to have sort of a vocabulary of special sounds that you can tap into, and that will be stuff like the diminished scale or the augmented scale or the whole tone scale. And you can check out and work on those, but you have to realize that it's not something you need all the time. So you're better off spending most of your time on the scales that are going to be coming back again and again in every piece. So what do you think? Is this a system that you're working with, or are you working with a completely different system that you think is a lot better? Then leave a comment on this video. Also, if you think that I left out a type of chord or a different chord that is very common, then leave a comment on that as well, because of course it's interesting to have a discussion on this, and most of this is actually coming out of my experience as a player. So you might have a different experience, and I would be curious to hear about that as well. If you want to learn more about jazz guitar and this is the first time you see one of my videos, then subscribe to my channel. The videos that I publish on this channel are all about finding good methods and solid strategies for you to improve your playing and explore interesting things in jazz guitar. If you want to help me keep making videos, then check out my Patreon page. I'm very grateful for the support that I'm getting from my patrons, and it's because of their support that I can keep on making videos every week. If you join us over on Patreon, I can also give you something in return for your support. That's about it for this week. Thank you for watching, and on to next week.